As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, bring the puck deep, put pucks in deep. We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
4 games into the Stanley Cup Final and some big PWHL news as we check in here. Episode 32 on the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast, joined by Jake Swanson and Colin Kapoor. I'm Casey Ditzel, and gentlemen, we'll start there. How's everything going? Colin, you've been on the golf course. It sounds like doing a little bit better than I was out there today. What's going on?
I'm doing well, Casey. I feel like a little bit better has to be relatively speaking to Mr. Golf Coach over here. So I'm like, bogey golf is like top tier, start popping the bottles for me. And that's where I was at today. So feeling pretty good.
I seem to be relegating my way back towards bogey golf from what used to be scratch and is far from it nowadays. I'm sitting in a bare apartment trying to drown my sorrows in some Fifth Liners hockey here after a bad golf day. And now nothing left of my once college home as I'm moving out to head back home now. The lease is up and college is, as of tomorrow morning, officially over. Jake, that's a big bummer as we send it over to you. What's happening out in Cleveland?
Yeah, well, it doesn't get too much better, Casey, after college. But hey, I mean, there's no more classes to worry about, so that's a great thing. I've been on the baseball train for this entire month, and it's not slowing down. I'm telling you, it's getting to like runaway speeds at this point, but it's every other day they're playing or coaching, but it might come to a halt, like a brief stop here. We've got like a week of rain in Cleveland, which sucks because I really wanted to play. We have a doubleheader scheduled for tomorrow, and I'm riding a hot streak. I'm 6 for 13 on the season, so we're going strong. I can still hit. Running, we don't need that. I just get to first base and we're good. So other than that, yeah, excited to see the PWHL stuff coming out. There's a lot of different rumors that we'll get to cover, but the expansion draft happened, and I was on the road in Erie when that was going on and saw our good friend Brooke McQuigg get picked up there in the expansion process. So really intrigued to see how this goes, and free agency opens up on Monday. So a lot of different players going a lot of different places.
And we'll have Brooke McQuigg on our next show upcoming next week as the Stanley Cup Final closes off. What a final it's been. We'll start there before we get into all the big PWHL news. A 2-2 series start through 4 games here, and 3 of the 4 games going into overtime. Just about everything we possibly could have expected out of this series, with obviously 2 of the 2 best teams in the NHL right now. And I guess first let's just go around and through 4 games, what have been your biggest takeaways for each of you? Colin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, first things first, you just think about it. This has to be one of the best sequels like of all time. You know, like you look at the sequels in like entertainment, like Godfather Part 2 is like the best one. Like I feel like The Dark Knight is my era of sequel, so I'm gonna say it's like on par with that in terms of maybe even exceeding the original just 4 games in, which is just crazy to think about the way that last year went. And so, key takeaways, well, I'm sure we're going to break down Game 4 here in just a minute, but overall, like, that Game 4 felt like a miniaturized version of last year's Stanley Cup Final, right? It was 3-0. Edmonton came back, and this time Edmonton got it. They won it in overtime. And overall, I think back to the conversation we had just under 2 weeks ago when we were previewing things, and we mentioned the goaltending as a huge inflection factor of this series. And in Game 4, Calvin Pickard comes in, and it's what Pete DeBoer wanted out of his goaltending decision in that series against the Oilers for Dallas. So just so much to think about. Obviously, Brad Marchand, Casey, I'm sure you'll talk about him here in a moment, but what a series it's been so far. It's crazy that we're only 4 games in, and there's still the potential of so much more intrigue and excitement to come here. This is so unbelievably great for the sport of hockey right now.
Yeah, definitely, Colin. And I mean, the goaltending is one of my favorite things to harp on these shows. And the fact that Calvin Pickard stepped in on the biggest stage and did that, it really speaks to how good how good of a mentality you have to have as a backup goaltender. And we don't talk about it enough, I don't think, where you're thrown into the starting job if your number one goes down and you have to be ready to play A1 hockey. And he did just that. So big ups to Picard. And I'm still not down on Skinner either. I think he just had a really bad start to the game and they just had to get something going. And hopefully that's going to be an interesting one too, to see who they start on Saturday, if they're going to stay with Picard or go with Skinner. So definitely something to look at there. But my nice surprise of the end, not too much of a surprise in terms of Oilers, but Leon Draisaitl has been really, really, really good. And that's tough to say when you have one of the best players in hockey on your line. And he's just really impressed me so far. I mean, 2 out of the 4 games have been him winning the game in overtime. And he actually, I just saw this stat earlier, he just passed his teammate now, Corey Perry, for the most overtime winners in a single playoffs series. And I think it was 3. He was tied with him after game 1, and he just broke it in game 4. So really becoming that captain clutch. And I should have put down the money on him to get the Conn Smythe, because I think I was the only one that said it when we were picking the Oilers. So really happy with him. But yeah, I mean, we all knew this series wasn't going to go less than 6 games. I mean, it just is the battle of the juggernauts, and it's really depth versus top end. And you're finding that out right now, who's going to have the better series. So really excited to see it. And I think Saturday is going to be a hell of a game. So I'm really geared up for that.
And I think the craziest part about Leon Draisaitl going into yesterday's game, he was a 12-1 odds, I think 4th or 5th in line for the Conn Smythe, behind guys like Bennett, Marchand, Bobrovsky. McDavid was the second favorite going into game 4 there, and he was plus 225. But Draisaitl, a 3-point outing, all of a sudden he's leading the playoffs in points. He's right up there in goal scoring. He's 3rd overall with 11 goals throughout this playoff. He has 32 points. How about Sam Bennett, too? 14 goals, 12 of them have been on the road. So something to watch, definitely, if you're betting, heading back to Edmonton for game 5. But Colin, you alluded to it. Brad Marchand is the guy that has just absolutely blown me out of my shoes, and one of my favorite players, right up there with Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk, the greaseballs of the world of hockey. And Marchand is beyond blown away expectation. I think you could put Corey Perry right there. 2 guys that just play greasy games, are up there in their elder years. Perry over 40 years old now, and Marchand kind of on the heels of that, 37. It has been phenomenal the way he's played, and he's right there. If he could get a couple goals coming down the stretch, maybe urge the Panthers to a Stanley Cup win, could be one of those Conn Smythe guys. But I think it's kind of Sam Bennett's to lose on the Panthers side. And Jake, I'm right with you. That was an outstanding call by you pre-series. Leon Draisaitl, if he can continue the scoring mark that he's had and kind of stay right there in points with McDavid, who seems to be putting up 2 or 3 every single night, he's got to be up there for the possible winners. Obviously, the overtimes has been what's made this series so good, and not just the overtimes, but the way it has gotten to overtime. We've seen 2 games now with goals in the final 20 seconds to extend to overtime, and both teams that have scored have ended up losing in the overtime period. Corey Perry scoring to tie it as the Panthers went on to win game 2. And then just a couple nights ago, the Panthers goal leading to Leon Draisaitl's overtime game winner. What has impressed you the most that we've seen in overtime, whether it was Marchand, the Panthers getting it done, Corey Perry's stunning goal, or Draisaitl's continued success here with back-to-back overtime winners in the 2 wins that Edmonton has had?
I think the most impressive thing for me, and you said Edmonton, but I'll just say the double overtime goal was just insane. I mean, that's the kind of thing where it's a player that was traded to this team from the team he's been with his entire career. All the storylines kind of write themselves there. And one thing just about the historical aspect of what we're watching, this is the first Cup final to have OT in 3 of its first 4 games since the 50s. And this is on the heels, like you said, Casey, of each regulation being as exciting as it is. And that's really, really cool to see from the outside looking in. And on the Edmonton side of things, I think just the way that the goal in Game 4 was just kind of mind blowing. Not in the way that it was an insane skill McDavid 1-on-5 goal, but in the fact that that puck went in the first place is kind of the crazy thing about it. We talked a lot about Sergei Bobrovsky last week or a couple weeks ago, and the prevailing narrative on social media was that's a goal that or a save you gotta make if you're Bobrovsky, and probably. But man, I mean, just kind of willing the puck into the back of the net and trusting the hockey gods to put it there is essentially what Draisaitl did, and that was pretty cool to see in Game 4.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's just the continued level of conditioning of both of these teams. I mean, Casey, we've talked about it before, especially when we see Clarkson's women's team going into 4 overtimes in their playoff runs, and it just every time
let's not take away from the conditioning of Casey.
Yeah, true. Yeah, him and all on his cough drops and honey and tea and everything. So I'm sure the play-by-play guys in the NHL level are definitely getting some more specialized treatment than Ditz with his bag of cough drops right next to him. But yeah, the conditioning of both of these teams to go on and play almost 80 minutes of hockey in that double overtime, like, it just blows my mind. I mean, all I can think of is just the Miracle on Ice famous scene of them going out and conditioning. The legs feed the wolf, gentlemen. And that's exactly what these two teams are showing. And it's going to be interesting, especially if it gets to 7 games, like what kind of mental mistakes are going to happen that might not have happened if these were all regulation games. So I think that's something to look for. And it might just be something really slight that happens at the end of a game, and it could be chalked up to them almost. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl, they've got to be on almost 25, 26 minutes of ice time at this point. So it's just, you got to make sure that you get your recovery in. And on top of that, again, the travel days. I mean, Edmonton to Sunrise, like that's a haul. So I think they've got to definitely be on their game towards the end of this run, but it's really impressed me so far how dig each team has been able to dig.
Well, this Game 5 is going to be an absolute brute when you talk about the travel schedule. They had 2 days off in between Games 3 and Game 4 down in Sunrise. Now just 1 day off, including the travel going back from Florida to Edmonton here. One thing that I want to bring up and see if this is raising red flags for anyone else here, when you look at the point scoring, leading the points is Draisaitl with 7. He has 4 goals. McDavid just behind him, second place in the series in points. The depth scoring has not necessarily been there or had to be there for that matter for Edmonton, really until this Game 4 when we saw that big-time comeback win. We'll get to that next here. But looking forward, if they are just relying this heavily on McDavid and Draisaitl, do you guys see a way where everybody except my pick comes through and Edmonton is able to win this series, or can Florida capitalize on that and maybe shut them down as they did last year?
Yeah, it's always a risk when you go and just put all of your faith in 1 or 2 guys. And I think that's what we said before, like the depth versus the top end. And I don't know if it's a red flag necessarily for me, because we know that McDavid and Draisaitl were the two that were going to drive this series. But I think McDavid, especially with his goal production not being like top tier in this Stanley Cup final, I think he needs to find a way to be that facilitator for more than just Draisaitl. And it's nothing against his play. Again, he's in the tops of points for a reason, and Draisaitl's having a generational run at the end of this playoff run. So I think that guys will step up when they need to, and because they have to. And I mean, we saw it a little bit flashes in game 4. I mean, Nugent Hopkins put one in, Jake Wallman on the blue line put one in. So if they can just capture that essence and keep that going forward, I think seeing different looks will also help them against Bobrovsky too, because I think he knows that shots are going to be coming from McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, he's not unaware of that. But if he sees something from the point from a Jake Wallman again, and he sees that one-timer, he's going to be a little bit less used to seeing that. So I don't think it's necessarily a red flag, but it's definitely something to watch, especially if we get deeper into these overtime games and someone else has to pull the trigger.
And I think if Florida came away with that game 4 and you're looking at a 3-1 series deficit, it's something that is more of a red flag, Casey. And the fact that Edmonton dug deep, to use Jake's verbiage there, and they got that win, that's where you think, okay, like, something is working. And obviously, if you want to win those next two, if it does go indeed to a game 7, which I think is probably what most people think this series is going to end up doing, someone's going to step up. When you say dig deep, that also applies to the roster, and it applies to the bottom 6, to those defenders that maybe you don't expect to put in a goal every single shift they're out there. But even if they're contributing offensively and like Jake said, and making Bobrovsky think, okay, maybe this dude is going to wind up and shoot or is going to be a threat to score against me, then it adds an extra little thing in the goaltender's mind of something else to look out for when Draisaitl, McDavid aren't out there on the ice. Now, we talked about Zach Hyman a few weeks ago and the impact of him not being there, and I think that Corey Perry being the lone forward, not named Draisaitl, with multiple goals, more than one goal, that's because of not having Zach Hyman, and I think that you're going to have people step up. And if it is on the blue line, you talked about those defenders. Bouchard's having a good postseason, and he's brought that in to the Cup Final. Darnell Nurse got a big goal there in the series too. So there are going to be guys that step up. I mean, this is a team that made it here, right? And the fact that they made it here shows that they know what they have to do to win the whole thing. And they're going to have these depth players really, really take things over if they want to win the entire cup.
When we think about game 4, and Colin, you talked about before, maybe thinking about how last year went and Edmonton trying to overcome that hump this year with a 3-0 start for Florida. All of a sudden, it looked like they were completely out of gas. Now they have to turn around and head on the road to maybe the most volatile environment in playoff hockey. That Rogers Center gets absolutely rocking, and definitely up there for bucket list places to go watch hockey. Now, as you think for Florida with the issues heading on the road, do you guys see any way that they can pull this one out in game 5, or do you think they're going to have to come back and maybe have an Edmonton-style comeback winning at home and then do it on the road for game 7?
Well, you think about the 4 periods from games 3 to the start of game 4, the Panthers outscored Edmonton 9-1. And you just got to get back into that style. I think it's interesting the way that when the teams try to adapt to what the other team is doing to them, as opposed to just playing their own style of hockey, that's when the issues have started. You think about game 3, Edmonton, I think I saw this on social media, they tried to out Florida, and they got their heads busted in because of that. And then you see in the second period, third period overtime of game 4, they're doing the type of stuff that got them there in the first place. So it really comes down to playing your style, and that's kind of a cliche that you hear all the time. But in the playoffs, you kind of got to go back to basics at that point. And I think Florida, you're going into enemy territory. You know that they love playing with a chip on their shoulder. That's not going to change. So it's obviously a huge game. You take a game on the road and you're going back home and you're feeling really good about yourself. But overall, like, this is a huge, and I think the comeback was probably the turning point of the series. If Edmonton does take the series, that's what we're going to see, as with the benefit of hindsight, that was the turning point. But Florida's they've got a lot left in the tank. Obviously, we talk about their depth all the time. And I think a guy like Sam Bennett's going to be huge in this game 5, just because of the way he plays and also just how well he's been with a guy like Brad Marchand as well. That pairing has been really great. So I think Florida's going to be just fine. I don't think they're going to roll over, and this game 5 is just going to be even more exciting because of that.
Yeah, and I mean, Colin, you sounded like all the coaches that all three of us have interviewed at that point, just playing our own style of hockey. But I agree. I mean, it just doesn't benefit you to kind of overthink what the opponent's going to do in any game. And I think once you get to that point where you're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to take what they give me and run with it. And I think that's what we saw Edmonton do to get that comeback into motion. So I think with Florida, you do have to rely on some of your top guys like Kachuk, like Bennett, but I think a lot of what they can do is just bring that physical prowess that you found in the regular season and really hammer it home in these last couple of games because again, about the conditioning, everyone's tired, but if you can make that extra hit, if you can just lay someone out, I think all the more better for Florida because they have the depth to replace. I don't think Edmonton really does on that sense. And we were worried about that coming into the series where, again, when you lose Zach Hyman, who's the next guy up? Is it going to be a Jeff Skinner? Is it going to be Nugent Hopkins kind of stepping into that role? So I think Florida has some bodies that they can throw at the Oilers. And I think that's what they need to do for this game 5 is just take that physicality towards them and kind of let the air out of the sails of the Rogers Center as hard as that's going to be.
Here's the big question going into game 5. You're the coach behind the Oilers bench sitting in Knobloch's situation. Who are you putting in net between Stuart Skinner and Cal Pickard? For me, it is a one-way street. I don't think there's any decision that you don't go with Pickard. The way he played when he needed to be called upon early in this playoffs was kind of the big kicker for me. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised they didn't go back to him after that. He was banged up with the injury, and Skinner kind of got on a hot streak there. Again, a little bit surprised they didn't pull him earlier in that third game when he struggled. And then you put Pickard in, and he had that dominant performance to finish off game 4. And really the only reason, in my opinion, that Edmonton now has a great chance to win the Stanley Cup, but for that matter, has any chance to win the Stanley Cup. For me, it is 100% Pickard. Are you guys on that same train, or do you have a little more faith in Stuart Skinner than I do?
Yeah, I mean, hate to rag on my boy with the best mustache in the NHL, but yeah, I think Pickard is definitely the choice going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if Knobloch went with Skinner just because, again, he's your starter. He's the guy that you know is fairly reliable throughout the ups and downs, but especially in this almost shortened season that you have at the end, the postseason, like you just have to ride the hot hand. There's no room for error. And if Pickard doesn't do well, you go right back to Skinner. And I think that's the benefit of having two starting caliber goaltenders in net. And the fact that you can go between the two, whereas with Florida, if Bob goes down, I mean, you have Vitek Vanacek backing him up. And I don't really know if Florida wants to have him in like a game 6, game 7 situation. Whereas if it's Pickard or Skinner in the net, if one of the others does bad, I'm not as worried behind the Edmonton bench if I have to go to my backup in that situation.
And that's a point that we brought up a few weeks ago about, is it better or worse to have two starting caliber guys when obviously you can only start one and you have to make that choice? And I think back to the Bruins a few years ago with the Ullmark and Swayman debate every single game and every single playoff series when they were playing against Toronto. And then is it you have Bobrovsky, who is your ride or die no matter what, but if he's struggling, you kind of have to keep him in there because he's your ride or die. And to answer your question, Casey, I'm right there with you. I think it's a no-brainer. I think the ice in the veins that Calvin Pickard showed in game 4 was incredible. There was the breakaway save, just I think the third shot he saw on Anton Lundell, and then that overtime save. I mean, oh my goodness, like he just deflected it, hit off the post, and then I think just minutes or maybe even seconds later, the overtime goal was scored by Draisaitl, and you just got to keep going with that. You think about, I mentioned the Dallas thing on the top of the episode. That's like the fact that he made that save on Lundell. It kind of mirrors the Jeff Skinner goal against DeSmith in the game against Dallas, where things fell apart from there for the Stars, and Edmonton getting that save from Pickard, maybe that sparked some kind of rally going forward into that game. So I think you roll with Pickard. I think that you kind of got to make the decision now and stick with it. And I think it's clear after the way that Pickard led, and not only led, but also the team rallied behind him in game 4.
As you look at the argument behind Skinner, maybe it's that in games 1 through 3 over the last 2 playoff seasons, he is 7-14 with an 870, just one shutout. 14-1 entering game 4. That's not counting what just happened, but a 942 with 3 shutouts. That will not count against him. And I saw a stat, I think it was Bleacher Report throughout. He was 6-0 in game 4s, and he will stay 6-0 because he doesn't get credited with the win or the loss.
That Mr. Game 4 tweet, like freezing cold takes, all old takes expose all of these. They were like ready for it, and then Edmonton comes back and wins, and they have to hit the delete button on those.
You know, I messed up. I texted Nico Sturm, you guys are absolutely humiliating them right now when they were up 3-0, and I did not text him after that one came through. That was right before Edmonton scored, and I was biting my nails. And they did not finish that one off.
I think you might go on the block list after that.
Yeah, I'll probably refrain from texting anything.
Well, this is why iOS has the unsend message function, Casey, for this exact scenario.
I could have used it, except he would have. Yeah, right. I needed it bad there. All right, let's close off the Stanley Cup Final here, and it is now a best of 3. Edmonton owns 2 of the possible 3. Who is taking this one away? Has anybody changed their thought? You guys both came into this series picking Edmonton. I had Florida. Where do you guys stand with 3 games to go?
Well, Casey, I got to stick with Edmonton because of the tagging and the subtweeting that I've gotten from you about my pick. So I'm gonna stick with my guns. I'm going with Edmonton. I think they win here in Game 5 at home, and then they lose in Game 6, and we go to Game 7 just like the hockey gods intended. I think they take Game 5, and it'll be a close game, but I think it's going to be finished in regulation.
Yeah, and I agree. I can't go away from my picks, especially because if we go to a Game 7, it's going to be in Edmonton, and seeing the Stanley Cup presented on Canadian soil to a Canadian team would be a hell of a sight, one that none of us have seen in our lifetimes. So that's pretty insane to say. So we'll see. But I'm feeling confident in my picks. A little less confident after the 6-1 game in Game 3, but I think Pickard can pick it up, and I think Draisaitl's going to continue to have this generational run in the playoffs.
I'm looking at the FanDuel odds right now, and it has Edmonton minus 115, excuse me, Florida minus 104. For us, confident in Game 7, if you're going to pick the winner, plus 220 for Edmonton to win in 7, plus 260 for Florida to win in 7. And that seems, if you're going to pick one of the two rather than having the minus odds, you might as well go for the 7-game set. I am wavering. I'm gonna stick to it. I'll stick to my guns as well. Florida in 7, and I think it's gonna have to come in dramatic comeback fashion. The best thing that we've seen so far has been offense, because we've had more or the same amount of overtime periods as games played, with 4 OT periods, 4 games. It's a 2-2 series. All 4 games have been overs. I think Edmonton has the chance to run them out of the house here in Game 5, and I think all that's going to do is send Florida packing back to Sunrise, get hungry, ready to go. They might do the same, or it's going to be a hard-fought battle, and then somehow, some way, the Panthers are going to be repeat champions. But this has been an unbelievable start through 4 games, and hopefully it lives up to it in a 7-game set upcoming. We will wait and see. We'll talk it through after that happens as well. A couple more NHL notes before we get over to the PWHL, and some big news breaking just a couple days ago here. Chris Kreider has been traded to Jake's Anaheim Ducks, and Kerry Terrence, a prospect from right up where we went to school, Jake, an Akwesasne guy, is headed back. a fairly minimal return, in my opinion. Although our New York Rangers fans in the chat, in both George Bannister and Matthew Mugno, seem to be big fans just out of the fact that Kreider's out of town and his entire contract is heading the same way. A lot of disrespect for a guy who really didn't have that bad of a season and is also in the top 4 of just about every offensive statistic in New York Rangers history. What were your guys' thoughts when you first saw the news here? Kreider headed way out west.
Yeah, I mean, seeing Kreider in a Ducks uniform is just going to be really weird for me. I mean, same as when I saw Trouba the first time, and I guess it's a nice storyline to have those two back together, the former captain and assistant captain in the New York Rangers. So, I mean, in that sense, they bring definitely a sense of veteran leadership to this fairly young Ducks room. So I think that will be a positive there. But I think the two contracts, having that on the books for the Ducks, I think this kind of subtly signals that they're not in on Mitch Marner. At least I'm hoping. And that was kind of a lot of the rumors going around, is that Anaheim's putting together an offer for Mitch Marner to come to the Ducks. And I just don't see the reason to do that, to bring one of the better players in the world of hockey to a really struggling team right now that's trying to find an identity. Just hired a new head coach, and like they're trying to surround, I think, these young guys with more veterans, and I think that's what Trouba and Kreider are going to do. But it is a lot of money to kind of tie up. I think between the two, I think Trouba's still at $8 million and Kreider's at $6.5 million, so almost $14.5 million, probably about what Marner's going to be asking for in the market. So I'm mixed. I think it was still a decent trade, and we didn't have to give up that much. But I wonder, like, what is he going to do from a production standpoint? Is he going to be the Chris Kreider of the President's Trophy winning Rangers, or is he going to just kind of middle long in that like 50 to 60 point range and just be there as a second first line guy? So interested to see how it does, but I'm hoping that it's more for a leadership perspective than the Ducks signaling that they want to do like a retool rather than rebuild.
Yeah, Jake, I'm there with you. I think Kreider production wise is going to be right around there, and I think for Anaheim, they want a Chris Kreider in their locker room more than anything else, and there's something to be said about that. This is a guy that has been a very, very strong player on the ice, but in New York, he was really good off the ice as well, and in the locker room in a leadership position, not as the captain, of course, but in alternate captain or whatever it is. So I like that move on that side. On the Rangers side, I don't really think they got that much for him. I think the main thing they got was the $6.5 million off their salary cap, and that's what they wanted out of it. So you probably, I mean, maybe, I don't know on the GM side of things, but I feel like a Rangers fan maybe would have hoped for a little bit more. I think if I remember correctly in our group chat, it was Kreider for scraps, and that's about it. And I don't know if I go that far in terms of the prospect and the pick that they got, but still, like, for a guy that scored almost 40 goals a couple years ago, you would think you would get a little bit more than that. And on the Ducks side of things, again, they're not. This doesn't make them a championship or even playoff contending team at all. It maybe brings them a half step closer, but the Ducks need to do a lot more if they want. On top of that, if they want to be in the mix next season, but I don't think that that's even in their plan to be in the mix next season. I think they're still kind of slogging around here. In what Jake said, in an actual rebuild instead of a roster retooling.
And that was the NHL report, was originally that it was the night before the trade broke, that it was just going to be for future considerations. Fortunately for the Rangers fans, it was future prospect in Terrence there. But yeah, still kind of and it goes back again to the Trouba trade that we talked a lot about that as well. Kind of a questionable return for a guy who was your captain. The Ducks make out in both of them, and all of a sudden they're building a pretty respective leadership core there. They brought Alex Killorn in a couple years ago on a pretty good contract. They add Kreider, another veteran there. You have Trouba, who was a captain and was well liked around the New York Rangers room, although the media maybe didn't like him as much, and his play style and the results hadn't been there for the first half of this season. But all of a sudden, the Ducks maybe could be on the climb, and they're scratching at the surface because they showed shades of a team that could be ready to get in the hunt, maybe like a Canadiens team. Plenty to talk about, certainly upcoming during this offseason on that front. The biggest news since we last talked, and we brought up the Ottinger fallout, has now come to a conclusion as Pete DeBoer has been fired. No surprise there at all for me, and everything about this kind of questionable on the DeBoer side, but he's getting paid next year no matter what. Doesn't have to coach now, and probably going to be the first in line whenever the next team decides to let their coaching carousel begin. And DeBoer is going to be the front runner for any of those jobs with either young teams or teams looking to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, this one was a little bit more of a shock to me, and I remember we talked about this, and I said that I don't think anything's going to come of this. I thought the way that he handled the whole situation at the end of the season was well handled, and so when I saw this news, I was like, man, like first I was like, okay, well Casey knows what he's talking about because obviously I didn't know that before. But yeah, I think this was a little bit weird to see. And I think that he's going to be, like you said, Casey, a pretty hot commodity. He's going to have probably his pick of where he wants to go of the vacancies out there. And I think on the star side of things, they're going to have to find someone that continues the true, real momentum that DeBoer created in Dallas. And so that's going to be an interesting decision that we'll look into, of course, a little bit later. But yeah, I think he was a really successful coach for Dallas, and he elevated that team into really good contentions and to some great playoff series. But yeah, it's just kind of the nature of the beast, I guess. Like there's a way that the season ended, I'm sure, isn't the sole reason for him getting let go, but I'm sure it didn't help. And I think this kind of shows to me that there was probably more simmering maybe under the surface that was already there before the whole thing at the end of this season happened.
Yeah, I didn't see it as much. I think I'm right in between you guys. It wasn't like a total shock, but it wasn't also a total certainty. I think for me, it was really just the NHL business, I guess, where if you can't get over the hump into that Stanley Cup final or win the Stanley Cup, they're going to go in a different direction. They're going to think, okay, we got to go somewhere else. And the easiest way to do it is the head coach. It's hard to say, but in sports, coaching staffs are a lot easier to replace than players. And I think we talked about that the last time we talked about this whole situation. Is that is it Ottinger or is it DeBoer? And the easiest answer is DeBoer, because he, one, doesn't have that contract, and two, he's not out there on the ice making those plays. So I think with what Colin said, like what they're going to need is someone that kind of just brings that energy into Dallas that's slowly becoming more of a hockey powerhouse than we've seen before. So I think they need the momentum to keep going. They can't hire someone that's just there to hold the reins and just let them do it. They need someone with fresh ideas and someone to kind of lead them into the playoffs in almost like a unexpected kind of way. I think DeBoer kind of laid the foundation here, and the next person has to be able to build it up even more.
It was no question for me, and I still think the right decision, although the next coach incoming has a pretty big challenge. They've got a lot of prospects in the AHL, which is good news, but the cap situation is going to be a nightmare. Projected just about $4 million is all they have to work with coming up. Might be good news for some people like Clarkson Golden Knight, Trey Taylor there, Jake, looking to break his way into the Stars organization. But they're gonna have some movement that they're gonna have to work with, some older guys that might not be coming back as Dallas Stars. And unfortunately for guys like Jamie Benn, that might be the end of their run. Although I'm sure he'll be a hot pickup, a grease guy. I would love to see him playing in a high level atmosphere to get one more shot at it. Last one on NHL topics. Mitch Marner starting to heat up as it is becoming more and more apparent that he may not be back, or at this point will not be back with the Toronto Maple Leafs upcoming. Some of the big free agency paths that are being rumored around: the LA Kings, Carolina Hurricanes, Pittsburgh Penguins, Detroit Red Wings, Philadelphia Flyers. Where do you see being a fit? Jake, the Ducks have also been up there potentially as a trade contender to pick up Marner here before the free agency deadline would come in. You say you don't necessarily want Marner coming to the Ducks at this stage of the game where they're still kind of building up right now. But where do you guys think Marner could fit in? Vegas, another one I missed on that list. I think that's a big-time contender to bring him in as well.
Yeah, it's tough for me because Marner, we haven't seen him without a Matthews behind him, and it's going to be the biggest challenge there to establish him as the number one guy somewhere. So I think wherever he has to go has to have a really good supporting cast so he can be that number one. And I don't know. I mean, I was a big fan of Utah for a little bit. I don't know if necessarily if that's going to happen now, but I think the young guys in like a Logan Cooley would be a really good complementary piece to him. But if I had to say now, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Vegas just because there's a lot of offensive firepower there. So he doesn't have to immediately be that number one guy. I mean, you have Jack Eichel, you have a Mark Stone, you have guys that are established in this league that can kind of just be that backbone that he needs to be the best player he can be. And I mean, the only thing kind of rocky there is the goaltending, but he's used to that. Toronto doesn't really have a stable goaltending mix for pretty much as long as he's been there. So I think that would be kind of a familiar place. And also you get to the West side and the Western Conference and get new opponents every year and get a new chance to break into the Western Conference playoffs. So I think there would be the most likely for me and also the easiest way to get as far away from the Toronto and the Metropolitan and the Atlantic as possible.
Yeah, Jake, I think Vegas was where my head was at as well. There's reporting by Elliot Friedman that Western Conference is where he's probably going to end up, or that would be the best fit for him. And I think it is interesting you bring up Matthews. It's like if he goes to a place like Seattle or like Anaheim, even like all of the eyes are going to be on him as the next superstar of this team, the number one of this team, the guy that should score 100 points and lead this team to the Stanley Cup or the playoffs or whatever it is. And if he goes to a team like Vegas, some of those questions will still be there. But Jack Eichel is on that team, like you said, Jake. And Jack Eichel is one of the best players in the entire league. And so not saying that Marner needs to be eased into a new environment, but it definitely could hurt to be eased into a new environment, especially if that environment is Vegas, where there is a lot, and of course that doesn't compare to Toronto, but there's still a lot of eyes on Vegas too. So I think that that's a good fit. It's probably one of the better fits that I can see. LA is another one. And I think, just prediction wise right now, it's going to be one of those two teams.
A team I would absolutely love just out of chaos for the upcoming season is the Boston Bruins. That's probably not going to happen just based on $26 million of projected cap for the Bruins and a needed rebuild. Going out and buying a top-tier guy, probably not the right move, especially on the offensive end. They need to build up more on the defensive side. But Pastrnak and Marner combo would be a pretty fun one to watch. How about like a Columbus Blue Jackets? They've got a ton of cap space upcoming. They're missing that spot that Gaudreau was in. They're going to have to fill something in there. A ton of young talent. I'm sure, it's a smaller market if he's trying to get out of the limelight. A little bit less media coverage there, and also a ton of young talent, which means the future could be bright. What do you guys think about Columbus as a landing spot?
I know this is completely unfair and whatever, but the first thought I had when you said this, Casey, was like, if a Mitch Marner scores in Columbus, does he make a sound? And that's just because he played in Toronto, and we were talking about Vegas, and we were talking about LA. Totally unfair, I get it, but that was just the first thought that came to mind. I guess it'd be pretty cool, but still, that was just the first thing that I thought of, because like it's Columbus, guys. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and also it's just like we don't know their personal preferences. I mean, he's been in Toronto for his entire career, so maybe he does prefer like a smaller market or a mid-sized market, and that's what he's looking for now. But again, we can't really get into the heads of these players. We can only go off of like the publicly available information, maybe some interviews. So I think Columbus would be, for me, it would be a dream destination, because then I could drive 2 hours down and watch him play, and that would be really fun. Or if he gets a rehab game in Cleveland and playing at Rocket Mortgage, that would be even more fun. But yeah, I agree. There's a lot of young talent there, and I've seen it come through the Monsters organization firsthand. And I think there's definitely a lot to be excited about, especially our boy Jet Greaves, who is a Monsters legend at this point, and also helped Columbus at the end for their wild card chase. So I think that would be fun. And then the other one that I wanted to pose, Casey, is Carolina. I mean, there's been a lot of talk after the Mikko Rantanen deal that they have some cap space to work with in this upcoming offseason. And as our resident Canes expert, what do you think about Marner lacing up in the red and black?
I think it's tough to see him as a fit there is the only problem, just with the play style. Rod Brindamore in a contract for 5 more years, and even though Canes fans seem to want him out, I think it would be absolutely asinine to get rid of him with the success they've had. But I don't know that I would see him. I think in the Four Nations he was pretty good, so maybe that was a pretty physical, hefty series there. The man-on-man kind of two-way rush game, I think it would be interesting, and that's certainly where they've been said that they want, is they're trying to go big game hunting and find themselves the scorer, the guy that's going to be able to score in the playoffs. I don't know that Marner's filled that bucket yet, but it would be he's the biggest name in free agency, so it would be right up there on the list of what they're potentially right now going out and looking for. So we'll have to wait and see. I would think the Rangers, if he wants a big market, the Rangers would have to be on that list. But yeah, I guess I think Vegas makes a lot of sense. That's where I think I would put my marbles in, and I'm rooting for Columbus. That's I want to see Columbus succeed. I was hoping they were going to get over the hump this year. It just didn't quite get there. All right, enough of the NHL. On to the PWHL side. Colin has to be pretty well versed in a lot of these names after about a decade of dynasties from his alma mater. Jake, you and I pretty confident on the ECAC, and in the expansion draft that just happened, especially up in the Great White North, the Vancouver Vortex, put that one out there. I think doing pretty well on the ECAC side. Kara Mori picking up one of our good friends, but not only that, adding quite a long list of talent. For me, I guess to start off, it is hard not to see one of these two, if not both teams, winning the Walter Cup or contending against each other. These two teams are both absolutely stacked, and I think this is going to be a Vegas situation going both ways, as they've kind of picked off the top of the crop. Like Seattle having Hillary Knight, Danielle Serdachny, Alex Carpenter, Caleb Barnes, and Corinne Schrader. And then Vancouver, you'd think you'd be out of big names. They got Sarah Nurse, Jennifer Gardner, Sophie Jakes, Claire Thompson, and that's before the expansion draft happened.
Yeah. And we'll go over the expansion draft real quick. And so Vancouver won the right to pick first, and they went with Ashton Bell, the defender from the Ottawa Charge. And that was a little bit of a surprise, I think, even for the broadcasters. But I think having what they did in free agency, then the top 3 or top 6 is Bell, Jakes, and Thompson. And I mean, Jakes and Thompson alone as a top 2, that is absolutely insane. And I mean, that's what Minnesota was running for most of their season. So really intrigued to see how Vancouver goes. Seattle then went 2 and 3 with Aneta Teralova from Ottawa and Hannah Bilka with Boston. Vancouver followed it up with our friend Brooke McQuigg and then Abby Roreen. Seattle went Jesse Eldridge and Julia Gosling, another ECAC alum. Another ECAC alum for Vancouver and Izzy Daniel. Then also went Gabby Rosenthal. Seattle then picked up 2D and Anna Wilgren, Megan Carter. Vancouver with Denisa Krajova and Sydney Bard, again, another ECAC alum. And then finally, Emily Brown was the last pick for Seattle. So I think both teams did really, really well in their drafting strategy, and I think they got exactly what they wanted. I don't think anybody was really rushing to pick or was really upset at what was left. I think, honestly, the original 6 teams are feeling a little bit hurt right now with how many of their top-tier players got picked. And I wanted to pose this question to both of you because we've all seen now 2 expansion drafts in the NHL. Was it too little of players to be protected here for the original 6 teams here, because you were only able to protect 3 initially, and then once you got down to a certain number of players, then you could protect your 4th. So just posing a question out to the both of you, do you think it should have been more? Do you think it should have been right where it was?
I think one more would have been probably a happy medium between the two sides. And I was seeing some stuff on social media on the Boston side of things surrounding the Hannah Bilka pick, and there was a few people saying like for the Fleet and their fan base, like losing a player like Bilka, like it's obviously hard, right? When you're a team that has just started on a league that has just started, these are players that are becoming ingratiated with their communities and their fan bases, and you want to keep that going season over season over season. But on the other hand, like I totally get it. Like you want to have these 2 new teams be up to par with the stacked rosters of every other team in this league. So I think one more probably bridges that gap. And obviously, you know, for Fleet fans, which I consider myself one as a Northeastern alum, you're obviously not going to protect every single person you want, and Bilka might not have even been on that list if there was an extra person. But it is definitely an interesting question, Jake, that you're only really going to see because it's going from 6 teams to 8. And as the league expands, as this process continues, I think the question isn't going to need to be asked as much. But it is also kind of interesting because we're seeing this league get built in real time, which none of us and no hockey fan has ever really seen, you know, on the NHL side. So it is kind of a cool thing to observe.
I would go one higher. I think at least 5. In my opinion, there is no explanation that players like Hillary Knight and Danielle Serdachny, a young player who was a first-round high pick last year, Kayla Barnes, same story, Claire Thompson, a first-round pick, that these teams were unable to keep their first-round picks and that they're going right back the other way. I think that you should at least have enough to keep your cores around. All of a sudden, these expansion teams are loaded with everybody else's, just outside, everybody else's 4th players that's been out there and nabbed. And the other interesting thing is with how short the contracts are in this league, just because that's still kind of a new evolving thing. There's a ton of free agents that are still out there, which also would have kind of lent me towards, being able to protect more of those players that are going to be under contract, just because you're going to have so many more options in free agency, or give them more draft picks here with how many college girls are coming out. The college draft or the prospect draft with girls coming over from Europe is going to be just as stacked upcoming in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and we'll turn over to there. They did just announce today the order of the prospect draft, and it's going to go New York, Boston, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Minnesota, Vancouver, Seattle. So the expansion teams get the last 2 picks of this. And I think that's a good compromise because, again, they just got all of this talent in the expansion draft. But
Can I throw out the word tampering? Is this too early? This has just made me irate. This whole process of sit and wait and let's see how the expansion teams, how good they get before we decide the draft order. Because if it didn't go well, maybe they get the 2-3 right behind New York. Oh wait, now they're too good. Now they get the last picks. Come on, that is I guess it's deserved because they would be probably early dynasties through from year 3 in their first years in the league, but it bamboozles me, the process that they've gone through here. It's been all over the map.
Yeah, and I think seeing the top prospects in this draft as well, like if you get a couple of these top picks, especially if you're Seattle and Vancouver, if you get the people that you want, it's instant Walter Cup playoffs for me. So we'll go over a few, and these again are names we've thrown out before, but the top 5, according to the hockeynews.com, Colton Kova, number 1, Haley Wynn, number 2, Casey O'Brien, number 3, Nicole Gosling, number 4, and Natalie Milenkova, number 5. Rounding out that, so we've got 2 Clarkson alums in there, and Wynn and Gosling, that top D pair. We've got Colton Kova from the ECAC, which Casey and I seen way too much of. And then we've got 2 WCHA girls in Casey O'Brien and Milenkova. So a lot of ways that both teams can go, but New York gets that first overall pick once again, and I think they are going to go with Colton Kova. I think it's going to be chalk, but interested to hear your guys' opinions about that number 1 pick there.
Yeah, I think on the
you got it.
On the New York side of things, I think you're right, Jake. The Haley Wynn and the Clarkson D pairing is cool on like the New York connection, whatever. But it's also, you saw the protected list for the Sirens, and I think a forward is the direction that they go here. And I mean, these college players, all of them are just so spectacular, and there's really not a miss in this top 8. And that's the funny thing that you mentioned about Seattle and Vancouver. They have the last 2 picks, but they're 7 and 8, and they're going to get a superstar. Like, that's just the nature of this draft. And so those teams are going to be really good. I've seen Milenkova live a few times. She was in Vermont, so a Hockey East play. I saw her play against Northeastern. She is just a fantastic player too. And she was one of like I think she was the best player on those Vermont teams, if I remember correctly. It was a few years ago because she transferred. But yeah, I think you're right, Jake, in terms of the first pick. And I think the Clarkson pair is not going to be too far behind. Maybe 2 and 3. Maybe Haley Wynn. I think Haley Wynn would go second is kind of the way that I broke it down in my head.
And I've got the exact same on there. I think it's a pretty safe lock. I know there's a lot of betting in the NFL draft and sometimes a little bit in the NHL draft on where the 1 spot is going to go. It's got to be minus 1,800 on Colton Kova to go to New York. You got Greg Fargo out there. And even looking back to last year, they drafted 4 girls out of Colgate in last year's draft. Big ECAC relegance there. And Colton Kova, I think, is going to be an absolute star right from the start. And thinking about the way Brooke McQuigg has made success, and that's a player at Colton Kova's physicality level without necessarily the star goal scoring ability. And she was a big power play talent at Clarkson. But Colton Kova has led the NCAA in goal scoring year after year, 215 points over the last 4 years, and then add 18 more in the COVID season to throw on top of that, which would bust most records and did at Colgate. But I think she's fit for the way that the league is transitioning the rules, that they're trying to up the physicality. They're keeping tally of hits during games. She fits that mold so perfectly. So I'm right there, not necessarily looking at the way their roster is built, but knowing the connection with Colton Kova and Colgate to that roster, and also just how much of a star she's built to be. I'm interested to see where Haley Wynn goes here, because I think she's got to be right up there for number 2. Maybe you could throw Casey O'Brien in that conversation. But I don't know that Boston would be the right fit. Unfortunately, I think Vancouver would have been a great landing spot they're going to be way too far down the list here. So very interested to see if Boston goes out and grabs her, or maybe she falls a little farther down to a Toronto team that's got a pretty set decor, maybe all the way down to 4 with Montreal. But I think she's too high of a talent, not as deep of a draft class. Next year is going to be unbelievable. Some of the decisions that are going to have to be made with the talent coming out of college for next year's draft. But I think Carlton Kova, O'Brien, Wynn are a pretty solid top 3.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the rest of this list, again, you can't really go wrong for honestly any of them. So I think also with the ECAC connection down the board and looking at the Quinnipiac connection, you got Kendall Cooper down there from the Bobcats, and that's a really good D-man to have later in that first round. And I mean, the other thing that I want to talk about too is Minnesota losing their top 2 in Jakes and Thompson. They're going to be looking for D. And I mean, there's a lot of different ones just outside the top 5 there. You've got Roy Gilday from Cornell. Again, you've got Cooper from Quinnipiac. And down the board, you got Nina Job Smith from Minnesota Duluth. You got, oh boy, you remember this name, Casey, from Yale, Vita Poniatowskaya? I think I said that. Yeah, okay. I did say that right. Good. From Yale. So there's a lot of good blue liners down deep in the draft. So I think that's probably where Minnesota is going to go. But I mean, it is star-studded looking all the way down this list. And I mean, you've even got the likes of older players in the mix for the draft as well. You've got Michelle Karvinen from the SDHL is coming over as a 35-year-old, so could bring some experience to a team. You've got Michaela Pazlova, who has been playing in Czechia and playing for the Czech national team that's coming over. I think she's either 28 or 29 at this point. So even if you want some experience, especially for these younger teams, you've got that as well. So the draft is going on June 24th. Casey is hoping to be boots on the ground for that one. And we're going to be looking at that top 8 and seeing how many Clarkson players are going to be taken there. I think it's going to be 2, maybe 3, if Ann Trukowski can sneak into that first round.
I think we see Trukowski on the wraparound. I bet Vancouver is going to try to go up and grab her second round. I know that's where she wants to go. I think she'll fall a little bit into the second round, but I think Trukowski is going to be going back out homecoming in Vancouver. Kara Mori with the ECAC connection again.
I almost forgot too, and this was something that I almost glossed over when looking at the PWHL socials, but when free agency opens on Monday, the ability for trades kicks in, and this year it includes draft picks, which was not a thing last year. You could not trade your prospect draft picks. So that is going to be an interesting caveat for these teams. And are they going to start stockpiling draft picks? Like, if you are a New York Sirens and you don't think you can go out and compete next year, are you going to be stockpiling draft picks? Or are you going to be trading for a draft spot on draft night like we see a lot in the NBA, the NFL, the NHL? Are you going to see that? So that's going to be an interesting one.
And that goes back again to how talented next year's draft is. Maybe you again, Jake, to your point, maybe you think you're not going to be competitive this year. You punt on this year and stack up picks. Next year's draft and it's such a added benefit compared to the NHL, where you get a Boston who trades Brad Marchand and brings in a second round pick that now, since they've made the Stanley Cup Final, has turned into a first round pick, but oh wait, that's the 32nd pick in the draft. Well, instead here, the worst you possibly get is the 8th, and you could have 2 top 8 picks, which is going to be next year somewhere out of the Wisconsin Badger, Ohio State, Minnesota, trifecta there, not counting any ECAC players that are coming out as well. But those 3 teams are just loaded with Patty Kazmaier opportunities, and probably 8 of the top 10 Patty Kaz are going to be going to the PWHL draft next year, and that's definitely something to think about for a couple of these GMs.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on the PWHL as we close it off here?
Oh man, I can't wait to see one, what's going on in the draft, and two, see when Seattle and Vancouver are going to get their namings. I'm hoping it's going to be before the season so they don't have to do a Washington football team, but
Seattle
we'll see.
Salmon.
Yeah.
Damn it. I was trying to think of an alliterative Seattle name after.
Oh yeah.
We can throw you in here. Jake and I went through ours. Mine was I was thinking of the fish market and the throwing of the fish. Seattle Salmon is perfect.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't remember what mine was, honestly.
I remember the Winter Classic in Seattle. They had the whole like fish thing happening when they were walking on the ice. Oh my God. Yeah. I put myself on the spot here. Let me think. You guys talk. I'll think for a second.
Yeah.
Vancouver Vortex was my pick for up north, I think.
I feel like they'd be a good rival with the Frost.
You gotta go with the problem with Seattle Salmon is the Seattle color is more of like a greenish, where that would go. Jake, yours was something with the Emerald City, right? That would be more on that side of it. Yeah, and I think Vancouver was the historical women's hockey team. I can't remember the name now. Oh geez, testing my long-term knowledge. We've never been known for that, so I don't blame you.
I was thinking Seattle Sirens, but I ran into the obvious conflict of interest with New York. But
if Utah couldn't get Yeti out of the trademark, I don't think that one's going to have any chance of going.
Yeah. So mine was the Vancouver Amazons. They were a women's hockey team in 1921 and 1922. So if they wanted to go for an homage to there.
Let's see. I'm just looking on Reddit now. I'm kind of cheating. But someone said the Seattle Emeralds for the Emerald City, which I don't hate. Yeah. Seattle Slashers is a little bit it's a little aggressive, but I don't hate it. But I think
Shades of Edmonton Oilers in Game 4.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna roll with Salmon. I think that's a good one. I like the.
All right, we got 2 votes at least.
Yeah, I like
there
the
for Seattle Salmon.
What about bringing back instead of the California Golden Seals, the Seattle Golden Seals?
Ooh. The Seattle Emerald Seals.
Emerald Seals. There
you go.
Colin, I don't know if you were on for our conversation when this happened last year when the Rock Lobsters dropped. No, yeah, you were.
I think I was.
This was around the big announcement of the Tahoe Night Monsters and their new broadcaster. This goes back to that one. I think it's time. You've got your original 6. I got absolutely shiestied by Matt in my argument that they needed better names out there. I think this is the time. We've got expansion. We've got new love for the game. A draft that is completely sold out, and they need a bigger venue for right now. And it's got to be the hardest ticket in North America to find is the PWHL draft.
Did they announce the names at the draft, or is that
No, they did that I think before this current season. So it was like
surprise.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember. I think it was right after you started to move to Tahoe. I think that's when they came out with it.
Yes, yeah. I remember it was like September, but yeah, I do, because there was a whole thing on Twitter about the fleet. I remember that. Yeah, my favorite is the Sirens. Just because of I just thought of like when I first saw it, I thought of like police sirens. That was my first thought, and then I thought about the hum of the city, whatever. I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, I hope they're good, and I hope the logos and like the branding is on par as well, because I think that's maybe once you get the name, if it's good or if it's bad, like if the branding isn't there, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
Well, women's hockey might be the hottest commodity in sports right now. The way that this league has sold out games across North America, we'll wait and see on that. I'm hoping to be up there a couple Tuesdays from now, but. Our focus now will switch back as Game 5 as this episode drops coming up tonight, and we'll find out who can take that all-important 3-2 series lead. Gentlemen, what's coming up for the next week until we talk again?
Baseball, and more baseball.
Yeah.
That's pretty much
I was
it.
trying to get that handicap down to sub-bogey golf.
That's like a 3-month. I'll think about that in August. Like if I
Maybe
can, like at this point, if I have like 3, like I try and get like 2 or 3 good shots a hole, and I'm happy. Like I'm just out there having a good time. Like
That's what it's all about.
yeah.
That's what my golf game has transitioned into, is going out and having fun. I've given up on playing good golf probably forever now. So
No U.S. Open aspirations.
Nope. And actually, after watching how the U.S. Open has gone for those guys who are at the best level, I don't think I even want to put myself anywhere near a TV camera and try to go through that. Although
the footage from Oakmont is ridiculous. Like that course is insane.
How about we close it off here with some U.S. Open picks? I didn't watch here on Friday. Let's take an updated look at the leaderboard. I know JJ Spawn tore it up on day one. He is not there anymore. Sam Burns at 3 under is the leader. JJ Spawn there at 2 under. Victor Hovland 1 under. Who do you guys got here? Koepka fell back a little bit day 2. Jake's.
You got me out of my depth here. Oh, jeez.
I'm going Hovland. He's gonna get his first one. I remember watching him as an amateur, and I was like, I mean, he was good, obviously, but I was like, man, like it's cool to see him like be at the top of his game right now. So I'm going Hovland.
Give me Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah.
Give me Scotty Scheffler. He's at 4 over. I don't care. He's gonna birdie so many times. I'm so out of my depth. I don't know anything about golf. I'm sorry.
How about Adam Scott tied 4th? That would be a cool one to see, a little bit of a comeback tour. I'm right with you, actually. I love that pick, Colin. Victor Hovland, he's kind of, he's been around the championship scene and just hasn't been able to break through. I think Brooks Koepka 2 over right now.
Bryson shot 7 over today.
Yeah, there was a lot of those. I was watching Jordan Spieth pretty closely yesterday, and he's fallen back quite a bit. Rory kind of held it in there, but +6 is, you're going to have to, I think at that rate, hope that guys, it's unbelievable to me that there's still people under par on this course, although it's only 3 of them left. I think the winning score is going to back up probably 2, 3, maybe 4 over, because they're supposed to be making the course even harder if that's possible coming up on the weekend. But plenty of sports to watch here. As we're going to be running out of our sport, closing in quickly on the off season here, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. 32 episodes up and down, and we will have our champion the next time we meet, whether that is the Edmonton Oilers or me sitting on my island cheering on the Florida Panthers down their Cup parade. But I'm rooting for both teams to just have fun and this one to go 7. For Jake Swanson and Colin Kapoor, we remind you to continue to check out our YouTube, Spotify, and Twitter accounts, Instagram and TikTok as well at Fifth Liners Pod, Fifth Line Pod on Twitter, the number 5 and THPOD. We'll be back in about a week. I'm Casey Ditzel. Again, Jake Swanson, Colin Kapoor on here. See if anyone else joins to recap the 2024-25 season. It'll be tying a full bow, and then we're looking forward to the offseason as we plan to be one of the few media outlets covering frequent hockey throughout the summer. Gentlemen, have a good week, and we'll talk soon.